let's get on to what everyone wants to hear about, which is Mulga Rock and Alligator River, and I'm sure that you want to talk about as well. So why don't you kick off with Mulga Rock and tell us a little bit about that, and I'll dip in with questions.
I'll go back through its history. It's really interesting. It was discovered in late 1970s by the Japanese. Completely blind deposit. What they did was they basically bulldozed a road through the Australian bush, basically in the middle of nowhere, for 160 kilometers. And they drilled a hole every 4 kilometers. And that's how they hit it. Didn't know it was there. They just knew that the geology was right. They then spent 20 years working on it due to political pressure back home, corporate issues back home, and political pressure in Australia. They quit. A gentleman named Mike Fuser, who's one of our shareholders, picked it up and listed a company called Energy Minerals Australia in 2008. In 2013, I had left the iron ore company I was running, mainly because all we were doing was making money, and I was bored.
Right.
So it was a great gig, but we weren't really doing a lot of business development. We were just, hugely successful from a corporate standpoint, but not what I wanted to do. I love building mines. So I got involved back then. We recapitalized the company, had a bit of debt, needed some money. Andrew Forrest came in. Andrew Forrest is 38% shareholder of Fortescue Metals Group. It's a 16, $18 billion iron ore company. And then we renamed it to Vimy. And it was just, Vimy's a town in northern France. We're in World War I. The Canadians had a very successful battle, and my great uncle was killed there. So it didn't translate into anything bad in Korean, Japanese, or Chinese, which is something you always have to check. But we rebadged it. We manned up, or personed up, sorry. Got a really good COO on board, who then, we started the pre-feasibility study, feasibility study, which released in January 2018. 15-year mine life, 3.5 million pounds of uranium a year. Average grade is about 770 ppm, so 0.08 percent. But we do plan to mine higher grade for the first 5 years. This is a large open pit. This is basically an old river channel, 50 meters deep. The ore is basically just unconsolidated river sediment, organic. We have no drill and blast, so our mining costs are very cheap. We're basically sand mining. We're going to mine it like a strip mine. So we'll start at one end of this old river channel, dig a hole, and as we move forward, we'll dump the waste behind us. It actually has a really low residual footprint because of that. We're actually backfilling our pits, and we're really proud about that. The ore is then treated using acid leach and resin, and we then extract the uranium and form yellowcake. And it's a really technically simple process. During the DFS, we dug 2 50-meter deep test pits, and we did that to assess what I call the diggability of the overburden, because your mining costs are one of your big drivers for your OPEX. And then we took 100-ton of sample, took that back to Perth, and put that through a pilot plant. Mm-hmm. And the thoroughness of what we did can be highlighted by the fact that we have a bore field on site, which will provide water for the operation, and we have more than enough for a 90-year operation. We actually trucked 2.5 tons of water from our bore field to the pilot plant in Perth to make sure that we were, crossing every T and dotting every I. Because normally you just use tap water and add some salt to it to make it look like that water. But we literally trucked water from 800 kilometers from Perth in the middle of nowhere to Perth, so that the pilot plant just would have no questions, just all answers.
So you've got a DFS, you've got a NPV here of $500 million at $60. Yeah, you need that $60. Obviously today it's not at that. So you need something to change in the marketplace, obviously, to monetize that. Not least of all, getting some cash into the company, presumably. And that's not going to happen again until the price moves. So, what's the position with regards to Mulga Rock at the moment? Is it just kind of sitting around and waiting for something to change, or do you continue to drill? How are you managing things?
So we've got all the technical work is done. We'll obviously have to go back through the DFS at some point in the next year and actually reset some of the assumptions on costs. Cost of people, cost equipment. I don't think the costs haven't blown out in any huge amount in Western Australia in terms of a mining boom. We think that the DFS is still pretty valid, but we need to validate it. So we'll certainly do that this year, but I wouldn't think those numbers would change too much. So the plan for us is this is a marketing-led financing. So we need to get contracts, which then lead to debt, which then lead to equity. So we need to have the contracts first, and that's where a lot of our effort has gone. The Section 232. Look, Section 232 has been to me, it's been a double-edged sword because yes, it has caused a lot of consternation, but it's actually pulled that rubber band back a bit. Meaning if the utilities had been writing contracts normally, Section 232 didn't happen. There was no hiatus in the contracting market. I think what would have happened is that a lot of marginal producers would have written not loss-making contracts, but marginal contracts to just keep going until the price went up. Whereas I think by having this hiatus, there'll be a little bit more urgency on the buy side. And I think what you'll see is you'll see a relaxing of what people want to pay to get that security of supply, because the hiatus has actually caused some people to go by the wayside.
That's an interesting thought. If you think that people will relax those thresholds for I'm an ex-banker. We needed certainty on lots of different moving parts before we consider investing into something. So Mulga Rock is at that point where you've done the DFS. You're pretty much ready to go.
We're working through what are called the secondary permits. So you need your mine closure plan, mine management plan. Those are like getting a permit to build your house. You just go through an exercise with the government, and we're currently doing that.
It's a known process, and I know the Australian government at the moment isn't necessarily pro-nuclear, but it's letting you mine, yeah?
Both sides. So we're about to have a federal election in May. The odds are now that the Labor Party will win, but they have a policy that allows uranium mining.
Right.
So that's not an issue. The state government have already said that we are allowed to proceed because we've got all the permits that the state government provides. So they've said that we can move forward.
Right, and so that's not going to affect your secondary permits or licenses at all?
No, it can't. In fact, it can't. And that's a good question, because the government, when they read into Parliament their uranium policy, they made it quite clear that they couldn't use that secondary process to frustrate our operation, and they haven't been.
Right, okay. So that brings it back to the economics here. So, you're going to at some point, you've got some cash in the bank at the moment. How much are you sitting on?
We got 2.4 in the bank, and we'll probably spend $1 million over the next quarter.
Right, and so that'll see you through, I don't know, what's the timeline on that?
Next financial year.
Right, okay. So that gets you through the next financial year. So there's a lot of things that have got to move in the marketplace for you to be able to go and raise additional capital to get this thing into production. Not least of all, clearly, the spot price, and then it's a question of how cheap or how expensive that money is. Yeah, but you're ready to go. Obviously, looking at secondary permits, and from what you said earlier, that also puts you in a very good position compared to a lot of the juniors out there. Not everyone has the permits or even DFSs in place for people to be able to make that economic assessment. So you're feeling quietly confident you can get through to the point where you think the market will move.
Yes. Well, yes, absolutely. And I've run junior companies. I've been associated with the junior industry for a long time. And, you do have to go out and tap the market now and again. We have very supportive shareholders. So the last time we did a raise, both our 10% shareholder in Paradise and 14% shareholder in Forest Family Investments, they both followed their money. So, we have very good support from our brokers. So if we need to raise money, to keep the lights on, if you like, that's not a problem. Right. So we, that's not an issue. Now the question is, we get asked a lot, how does a company that's capitalized at $36 million raise that much money? Well, there's two answers to that. One is, if the market recovers to the point where we can make this work, then you're going to have growth in your equity side. Your market cap will grow. And the second thing is that when you look at this project from a technical standpoint, how quite simple it is, the low technical risk of this project, and you look at where a lot of commentators think the price is going to go in terms of the spot price, so the consensus price forecast, if you like, it does take us up to where we need to be. So, you got to remember that it's a 2-year build. So say we go into financial investment decision in 20, and we decide mid 20 that yes, we're gonna go on this. We've got financing. We're gonna go. It's mid 22 before you're producing. Now by mid 22, the general consensus is that the median consensus price is around 51. And if you add the normal margin to that you would see historically on a $50 price, it's up around 62. So those are just consensus prices. And that's stuff we'd like to get into the market. We've got a lot of information on this, and that's stuff we want to get out there. But I think, and that 62 would be a great price. 55 would work for us. 62 would be fantastic. So it's going to be market led. And as I say, it'll be market led by us getting the contracts. We've done a lot of work with banks. We know what our floor price needs to be. And so that's the trick. So get the contracts at the price that will allow the debt, and that'll allow the equity. It's hard work. I'm not saying, I'm not delusional. I don't think this is going to be easy. But I do believe that if the prices get to where we need them to be, we will make it work. And we have built mines before. So that bit of it, once the financing's done, that bit of it ironically, it'll be the easy bit.
No, I understand that. And I think people should appreciate the fact that you have done this before, albeit in a different space, and these things, there are cycles, and they play the same way generally. You touched upon your shareholders there. Obviously, the Forrest family, very well known. Paradise Investment. I've not heard of them. Are they an Aussie outfit?
Yeah, they're based in Sydney. So used to be a fund run by David Paradise. They run, I think they basically do high net worth money. Very successful. They've had very good yields, good returns. They're, what's the best way smart conservative is probably the best way.
Right.
They actually like the uranium space. They have a few investments in uranium. They also invested in BC Iron and did very well out of that. So they and I have a history. So they're backing, I guess they're backing the jockey as well as the horse.
And what about Michael Fooster?
So Michael he's a geologist. He was the founder of the company. So he's been in since the beginning, slowly diluted down, but Michael, he very strongly likes the uranium space. I mean, this is his baby, if you like, and there's nothing I'm going to enjoy better than handing Michael the scissors to cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony. I mean, Michael deserves to be there for that.